a dream. So as you log on, just give me a holler. Let me know if you can hear me. Audio and video is coming through. All right, I can see people jumping on. We're now on the chapter on meditation, the 3 stages of meditation, which is chapter 5. So let me know if you can hear me okay, if the audio and video are coming through okay. This is the book that we're covering. Is This a Dream? Elizabeth Jordan, thank you. I can see you on Periscope. Kevin on LinkedIn. Jose, Sandhya, great. So this is the book, Is This a Dream? It is available on Amazon. Thank you to all those who have left your reviews. Please do leave a review if you are reading the book. Great. Vicky, thank you. Monica, Francisco. Fantastic. All right. So as we wait for others to jump on, let's take a few minutes here. Candace Parker, close by in Maryland. So let's take a few minutes or a few moments as everybody logs in. Thank you, Miriam. Thank you, Nasa. Pranav. So we'll take this moment to connect. Take some full and easy breaths. The space that we're all sharing. Feeling into the space that we're all sharing. Feeling into ourselves as individuals. And then a little deeper, ourselves as a connected community. And even deeper, to our essential nature. Breathe fully in and out. And just soak in this for a few moments. As we recognize ourselves here, we see a deeper aspect of what we are. and what this world is. So let's come back to each other here now. In this world of dancing, unity, and multiplicity. So now the deeper nature of what you are, what I am, what this is informing our experience. Right? So at a very simple, practical level, this is meditation. It is letting go of the assumptions, letting go of the structures of thought, letting go of the interpretations of perceptions, and recognizing our essential intelligence. The intelligence that is prior to individuality. And yet, amazingly and beautifully, can express through multiplicity, individuality, community, as we are doing together now. Okay, so today I'm going to be flipping back and forth on Windows because I couldn't print out the questions. So let's start with the questions. This is the book again, Is This a Dream? Available on Amazon. Please do leave a review if you're reading the book. And let's jump right in. Okay, so first question is, how do we distinguish one's past life memories from those of the human collective? Okay. So rather than talking about techniques or how to distinguish one of these from the other, it's important to emphasize here that what really matters is what is meaningful, right? So right now we're having an experience, and we might say, this is our waking experience. We're seeing each other on a screen, right? Or I can see these comments, I can see some comments, you can hear the voice. This is an experience that we are sharing. And some would say, this is live, this is happening now, this is in my waking experience. That's one way to talk about this experience. Somebody else might say, well, this is actually a dream. It's kind of like a dream that's happening. That's another way to label this very same experience, right? Somebody would say that, well, it's an interpretation. Somebody would say, well, this is deja vu. I saw this before, I experienced this before, and now I'm experiencing. There's so many ways to categorize one experience, right? Is it past life? Is it dream? Is it memory? Is it imagination? Two things that are important to recognize. One is that all of these have something in common, right? Which is an interpretive process, right? Regardless of how we label it or categorize it, right? Whether it's a dream, whether it's imagination, whether it's a live, what we call a physical perception, whether it's a past life, there's some interpretation happening from an underlying awareness that is interpreting some kind of form, some kind of event as something particular, right? That's number one. Now, if we take that and combine it with the fact that this either has some significance for us, meaning some meaning, it means something to us, or it really doesn't, right? If you take those two, that is really the key in culling the experience, right? It's not so much whether we call it a past life or, this kind of conversation can go on forever as to whether it actually is this, whether it's actually a dream, right? But the point is to recognize the possibilities And the clarity might come later. We'll take that as a separate issue. The clarity might come later as to how to actually classify it. But even more important than that is to recognize that there is an interpretive process happening, regardless of how we might classify it. And then subsequent to that, say that, well, this feels meaningful in my life, right? This seems to suggest this. And if we can integrate those two into our lives, that's enough, right? That's enough for that experience, whatever it is, to inform us now, right? Just like if I stub my toe and there's pain, and if I say, well, whether this is deja vu or whether this is a dream or whether this is reality, or the fact that it is influencing and it has some bearing, maybe the toe is broken and maybe I need to wear some kind of dressing around it, right? That is the relevance to the life, not so much exactly how we classify it. All right. So the recognition of interpretation, which is a very deep process because that happens for any kind of circumstance, and then the meaning that it may have for us, right? That's really what informs our life, what nourishes our life and our ability to engage and live, right? So I would focus on that rather than trying to figure out whether this is a past life experience or whether this is a collective experience. That kind of clarity, those will come in time as the mind settles. And since we did that meditation, recognize that underlying clarity that is still here now. Right? As we talk about all these modifications, which is what these words are, which is what these ideas are, recognize the underlying clarity that is expressing as all of this, as all of us. Next question is, if there is just one self and time does not exist, is it not just the one self manifesting in many forms over and over again? All right. If there's just one self and time does not exist. Okay, I have to keep flipping windows here. So is there just one self? Certainly many of the wisdom traditions, we talk about one self, or there is one self, there is the one reality, right? Why is that talked about? It's talked about because attention in societies over time has always been primarily on multiplicity. The world itself, at the level of individuality, is a world of multiplicity, right? So what we call scriptures or wisdom traditions are addressing multiplicity. And so what are they going to say? They're going to say that there is one. There's no need to say that there are many, because this is the experience of individuality, is manyness. Right? So they're going to say there is one self. So this context is important to recognize. It is not that there is only one and there is no many, right? Where that is said, it is said as a teaching tool to direct attention, right? That there is only one, because the attention is so habitually directed on many that it serves to shift our attention to see in a new way. All right, this is important. So where there is one, there is many. I showed one and one. Where one implies that there are be two. So one and the many go together. So it's not that there is just one self. There is the self that is often indicated. And this self appears as the multiplicity. There is the multiplicity experienced as the first mind, right? And this multiplicity, when seen deeply, the essential self, the one. So the one and the one and the many are always dancing together. Okay, so that was just the beginning. If there's just one self and time does not exist. So same question here, does time not exist? Certainly at the level of multiplicity, in the configuration of the first mind, time does exist, right? We have the dates, we have the years progressing linearly, we have the months progressing linearly for a while, but then cycling back, the days cycling back. So there is a sense of time at the level of the first mind. In the configuration of duality and multiplicity, there is the sense of time. So it is not that there is no time, but it is that at a particular configuration of identity, there is no time, or there is timelessness. Right? So we can say that as the first mind, we experience time. Right? 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. We arrange our schedules accordingly. Clock time, linear time. And then as that mind starts to integrate and relaxes, rather than being restricted to that, that mind will access rhythm, right? That the day can go according to rhythm, and it doesn't have to be according to these numbers, according to these concepts. If we integrate beyond rhythm, there's simply sequence or there's change, right? There has to be some fundamental change for us to even recognize a rhythm within that change. And there has to be a rhythm for us to then derive time, the concept of time. So you can see this progression from timelessness to change and sequence to rhythm and finally to linear time, which is what most of the society goes by, is linear time. So it wouldn't be complete to say there is no time, but again, this is an indication because society is a first mind society, because the attention is habitually with multiplicity, then to direct the attention, we call attention to timelessness, right? In terms of living, there's this interplay, the deep, right? We may have been approaching timelessness as we meditated together, right? So there is this depth, there is this beauty, there is a rhythm to even what is happening now, right? The comments that are coming, the speaking, the words, the ideas, the rhythm of that can be appreciated because we have gone to the depths of what we are. So we're not stuck only in linearity and time. So the full range of time and timelessness is important here. So these are the two assumptions that we're looking at in the question. If there is just one self, which we addressed, and time does not exist, which we addressed, is it not just the one self manifesting in many forms over and over again? Yes, in one perspective, this is what it is, right? This is somewhat similar to the second mind perspective. It is the one manifesting as the many. It is the many manifesting as the one, right? Mutual superimposition, mutual projection, right? If the identity is configured as the first mind, right? As restricted to just being this individual, right? We're not saying that we're not the individual, but if it's restricted to only being this individual, then that experience is of linear time, right? And then we see that this one self appears to be a projection, right? This deeper self that people talk about that sounds mystical or sounds spiritual or that science wants to investigate, but it will look like it is the brain that is projecting that. Why? Because the mind is in a first mind configuration where the primary identities with physicality, so then the body is what is primary. So when we talk about something like oneness or one, it seems to be some kind of projection of the mind. When identity shifts, when the mind reconfigures, then it reverses. right? Or it changes to some extent depending on how the configuration changes, such that what is more primary is not only this body, but it is this deeper reality, or it is this, let's say, beyond physical or subtle reality. So that's the one and the many. Felicia says, words are pointers not intended to be absolute, right? Of course, because words themselves are relative. Words themselves depend on a particular language. So the very fact that we're communicating in English takes certain assumptions, right? We assume certain things based on the language that we're using. Those of you that speak multiple languages will know that when you speak one language, you can feel like a different person as compared to speaking another language. The mind feels different. What you can express and how you express will be different. So naturally, words are nowhere close to being absolute. Why does reality, well, the question just disappeared. There was a question there. Why does reality go to linear time? Why can't it stay at timelessness? Because reality is not a thing. Reality is not a fixed thing, right? The question is, what is the view of what is happening, right? In what kind of configuration is the view being engaged, right? If I'm looking at, there's a guitar in the corner of this room, okay? So there's a guitar. So if I'm looking at it like this, I see it in one way. Now, if I go right up to it and look at it, if it's this close, it looks different to me, right? If I fly up to outer space and look down to see it, I won't see it at all, right? So what we call a guitar appears different based on how it's being perceived, based on the angle of perception, based on the acuity of the vision, right? Similarly, what we call reality, it's not some fixed thing. It's perceived in relationship with the observer, right? So it is not that reality is changing, but the view that we take changes, which is the thrust behind the three minds, behind the framework of the three minds, that as the view changes that we take, depending on our assumptions, our tendencies, then what we recognize or imagine or call or don't call reality also changes accordingly. So Anil says, live life like Krishna in the same moment and experience life like Shiva in the same moment. Yeah, so this is another way to summarize it beautifully. So Krishna, in Hinduism, Krishna represents the playful nature, right? So Krishna sees life as a lila, or like a play, like a dance, right? The expression. And this is much more in tune with the stage of life for most people in society in terms of actually acting in the world, right? We have work to do in the world, we communicate, we have families, we have friends, right? We have sometimes that are good, sometimes we struggle. So this participation, right? The participatory world is represented by Krishna. And at the same time, Shiva is indicated as the ascetic, right? That awareness principle who appears to be detached from all that is happening. And so somehow bringing these apparent polarities close together, right? That is the work of living. The engagement in the exuberant dance of life and the awareness, right? So if we go back to the meditation we did at the beginning, moving into the depths is represented by that Shiva, right? But remaining in the depths, we're not in that same kind of meditation now, right? Now concepts have come, perceptions have come, ideas have come, language has come, right? So it is moving into more of that Krishna phase. However, that awareness is still there because we have recognized it. So that's exactly what's being said here. The Shiva and the Krishna in juxtaposition. All right. And everybody has different set points. That's important to say, right? Where exactly we fall based on our karma, our dharma, right? Our tendencies, the desires. That's what makes life so vivid and diverse. Like a rainforest. I think of the rainforest, like the Amazon rainforest. Such a diversity of life, right? Amazing colors, amazing sounds, such a diversity of life. And that's what it's like here. And at the same time, you have, for example, the Himalayan mountain ranges, right? Which seems to be the picture of majestic, pristine, silent beauty, right? So imagine the Amazon rainforest and the Himalayan peaks in one. This is life. All right. Next. So what do we create from this point? Everlasting peace or something better? I'm not sure there's anything like everlasting peace. This peace that is often spoken about is this deeper, it's one of the deeper layers of living, right? But the goal is not everlasting peace. The goal is to be ourselves, right? The highest goal is to be oneself. Even higher than ideas of enlightenment or ideas of being the best at something. The highest goal is to be oneself. There's nothing more that one can do than be oneself, right? Fully realizing what one is, we may say, is the highest goal. So peace and experiencing peace and knowing peace as one's own anatomy, as an aspect of one's own anatomy, this is part of the journey, right? However, peace itself is not the goal. Peace, period, is not a goal, right? And where's the excitement of playing this game? Whatever game, soccer, right? Where's the excitement of playing with your friends? Where's the excitement of a drama, right? Where is falling in love? Where is heartbreak? All of these are aspects. Where is feeling fear and meeting it with courage, right? So it's not simply peace, peace, peace. Again, we talk about peace. Wisdom traditions talk about peace because look at the state of the world, right? Much of our most advanced technology in this world very often is used to destroy, right? Much of the most advanced technology is used in that way. So certainly peace is very important. Peace is huge. It's not the same as everlasting peace is the ultimate goal. There is a place for that conversation because of the importance of peace. The highest goal is to be oneself because everything else is included in that, right? Peace is included in that. Bliss is included in that. But also recognizing ourselves in relationship with others is included in that, right? So there's the last time we talked about the pendulum swing, saying no, there's no multiplicity. There's only one, right? There's only this. yes, that is true in a perspective, and that differentiating as this. So making room for that full spectrum. Okay. Truth is relative to the perception that one experiences. Yes, this is one of the tenets of the three minds, is that truth is relative to perception. And perception is relative to identity, right? And by identity, I mean the configuration of this mind. So truth is relative to perception. It is not only relative to perception at that level, it's also relative to emotion, it's relative to thought, it's relative to our stories, right? Now, these are commingled, these are interdependent. So perception, our thought depends on our perception, certainly, right? But then emotion is also part of it. So some emotions, if they're not experienced, then we cannot experience certain truths because the mind will not let us go there because it doesn't want to experience this, right? This part of the mind should not be experienced. So then truth becomes just this part. That aspect of it cannot be recognized. So it's not only perception. Truth is relative to perception, to thought, to emotion. And what is fundamental to all of these is identity. Right? The way we perceive, the way we think, the way we feel, our perceptions, thoughts, feelings, emotions, desires, these are all part and parcel of the boundary of identity that defines us. How exactly does one integrate themselves into that which repels them? So please do look at some of the earlier talks on the three minds where we did talk about some of this in detail. It's not about simply shifting identity or ignoring a part of our identity, but there's an integrative process, which we've spoken about before. In meditation, how does one transcend bad karma? Okay. Which meditation? I'm just going to call attention back to the meditation we did at the beginning that is still going on right now. That meditativeness, the recognition of the deeper aspect of what we are. So how does one transcend bad karma? Karma is those actions, those forces, tendencies that are in action already, that are already acting, taking force, having influence, right? This is karma. It's not simply, sometimes it's translated as just action. It's not only action, it's those actions that are coming into fruition and propelling us now. So it's not so much about transcending bad karma, but simply how do we meet what is happening now, right? What is happening now, which is the effect of many things that have happened within the frame of time. How do we meet this? This is what meditation helps with. Right? It's not an escaping it or transcending it, unless if what you mean by transcend is the way we can meet it more fully, then yes. So through meditation, we see what we are more deeply. We see what we are more fully, right? Beyond the stories we've been told about what we are. And because of that, the influences that are coming to fruition now in our lives, which are what? Which are the events that are happening now in our lives. Depending on how we recognize ourselves and what is happening, we will take those events differently. Right? Isn't that true? Depending on how well we understand what's happening, don't we react differently to what's going on? Right? If I had never been in a fender bender before, and there's a fender bender that I get into, I may be very stressed out. We don't know what happens. Is this person going to call the police? Is it going to affect? So many questions could come into our experience. But if we've had that experience, or if we work with some kind of automotive authority, it's known to us. We see the deeper layers of action, how things progress. Now that same experience is experienced very differently. The event is the same, but our ability to recognize and manage is quite different because of our expansive vision of that circumstance. So similarly, meditation takes us to a more comprehensive vision of what we are and the events in our lives. And therefore, as this karma comes to fruition, we're able to meet it more in a way that doesn't create more and more reactions, doesn't create more and more karma of that same kind. Right? So it's not about transcending bad karma or meeting good karma. It's that this is the karma that's coming to fruition now. How am I meeting this? Well, I can do that best with a greater awareness of what's happening. And that is the goal of meditation. All right. What if the mind is generated by the body, perception, and the brain? If the brain dies, how do we know consciousness goes on? Well, so this goes back to an age-old question: does the body produce the mind? Does the mind produce does the body produce the mind? Does the mind produce the brain and/or body? And how do we know, essentially? If the brain dies, how do we know consciousness goes on? So always come back to the identity and you will find the answer in the question. When we say, how do I know? Right? What is the nature of this I that is asking? What is the configuration of this mind that is asking the question, how do I know if consciousness goes on when the brain dies? If that sense of identity is primarily in affiliation with the body, then I don't know, right? Because that identification blocks any further vision, that it is, this body is what I am, so now how can there be anything else? That vision isn't there until the time where the identity switches, when the body stops moving, right? So as long as the body is alive and functioning, and the identity is associated primarily and exclusively with that body, or mostly exclusively, then this I that is asking the question cannot know. This is the definition of the first mind configuration, right? And this is why there's so much talk about mind-body medicine. How does mind influence body? How does body? Because we are generally taught first mind behavior, first mind stories, first mind science, first mind philosophy in this culture, in this world culture now. That is the most popular form, and therefore all of this question is there, right? Now, how do I know if this I is of a subtle mind, right, where the boundaries are not restricted to a particular body or even a particular kind of mind? Now, that mind has a different kind of vision, where the body is a very useful way of expressing itself, and the body is not the only way, or this body is not the only way of expressing itself, right? So there, the vision changes. How do I know? Well, I know because I see it, right? How do I know I'm seeing a screen right now? Where is the scientific study that tells me I'm seeing a screen right now? Well, there is none, right? And beyond that, at the level of consciousness, how do I know that brain doesn't create mind? How do I know that mind creates brain? Well, at a even deeper level, there's no difference. So we go back to a beginning. We go back to the beginning. There's no reincarnation, right? Because as consciousness, there's no incarnation for there to be a reincarnation. So closely look at the identity that is asking the question, and you will see the answer packed into there. So we'll look at that question again. What if the mind is generated by the body, perception of the brain? If the brain dies, how do we know? Or how do I know consciousness goes on? It depends on the nature of this I. It depends on how comprehensive this I is. Which is why we ask reflective questions like, is this a dream? What is meditation? Right? And all the questions that are being asked is to look more deeply at our identity, how it's formed, its boundaries, how it changes, and slowly see that vision seeing through these boundaries. Okay. Getting close to time here. Can you elaborate on the recognition that there is no good or evil? And these are concepts of the dual forces in the first mind configuration. So I would not say there is no good or evil. This is very similar to a lot of the other questions that we have heard, right? There's just oneself. There is no time. Remember, these are all indications to help us shift our attention to recognize more of what is, right? They're not complete statements in and of themselves. So again, it's not that there is no good or bad. We very much have good or bad in our society, right? Of course, we can see that they're relative. What's good in one society is not good in another, right? In some societies, in some cultures, it's good to reflect, spend much of the day reflecting, right? And then talking about that and putting that into action in a particular kind of society. It might be away from the modern culture, like a subset, right? In another culture, you may have to work, like in the majority of the world, 40 hours a week or whatever the hours are for that week, and that's considered good. And if you don't do that, it's abnormal or possibly even bad, right? So certainly good or bad are relative, and I think that's what you're speaking to here. That good and bad are relative to the culture, right? With animals, they won't have so many good and bad, right? It's not so much good or bad action, it's just that actions have results and actions create other actions, right? So if as an animal I'm not following the rules of the pack, there'll be some consequences. If I am following the rules of the pack, there will be some consequences. So it's simply actions lead to certain results and lead to certain actions. So at that level, it's not necessarily good or bad. At the same time, we can see that when we go more deeply, yes, prior to this interpretive process, not just the interpretation of an action as good or bad, but the very interpretation of ourselves as this world of multiplicity. Right? Prior to that, there cannot be such an experience as good or bad. Right? So at the first mind level, multiplicity, societal rules pertaining to individuals and communities, yes, there is a good and bad. Right? We have to understand that it's relative, but there's still a relative good and bad. Harming someone intentionally is bad, we can say. Right? Helping someone is good. So we don't have to force society to change its language. We don't have to try to force fit things like a square peg into a round hole. No, we can still appreciate good and bad, and we can still recognize that it exists at certain levels of identity. And the deeper we go and the less we are talking about interpreted processes, the less that expression of good and bad is projected and interpreted. All right. It matters how we live our lives. And the question of acting from an inner ethic comes to mind. How does this relate to non-dual teachings? So this is a question, we spoke earlier about karma, dharma, and what that means in terms of how we live. Karma are the events that have happened, or the actions that have happened that are coming to fruition right now. This is our karma. Dharma is our nature, right? This also matters. Two people are not going to be the same. One person wishes to paint, to express themselves. One person speaks. One person remains silent. One person works in the store. Everybody has their way of expressing, right? So that's our dharma. So this combination of our karma, the actions that are coming to fruition, our dharma, which is our nature, and then our awareness, the depth of our awareness. Where these meet, this is how we live our lives, right? This is what determines the course of our lives. So the way this comes into non-dual teachings is that the essential nature of all of this is recognized. That's what Advaita speaks of, right? The non-dual that is recognized in and through the world of multiplicity, right? So this is a second mind perspective we are describing, in which the deeper reality is recognized, self-modifying as this world. So how do we act with that kind of recognition? Depends on our own nature. What is our tendency? What is our unique way of expressing? Right? Sometimes that takes time to discover because of the educational system, the shoulds, the should nots, have to do, don't have to do. All of this creates clouds in the mind to obscure our innate expression. But where the karma meets our own nature and meets the depth of our awareness, this is where all of these come together to determine how we act in this world. And there's a couple more follow-ups here for that question. Can we say that love is the knowing that we share our essential nature or being with all people, animals, things, and therefore acting with the best intention of utmost kindness? Yes, we can say that. So this is a mind that talks about love as the ultimate reality. So you'll hear people saying, what is ultimate reality? Right? What is that ultimate reality? And ultimate reality as such is not a thing. Right? We can't say ultimate reality, that's love. Right? Many people say it, we can say it. Certainly if we lived as if reality were love, the world would probably be a much more beautiful place. There would be much less suffering. Well, that's different from saying ultimate reality is love. Or some people will say ultimate reality is peace. It's peace, everlasting peace, or some people say stillness, absolute stillness, right? This is because when communicating, one has to say something, right? So in Vedanta, one thing they say is Satchidananda is the nature of reality. Satchitananda, existence, consciousness, bliss, right? Because something has to be said. So some of the deepest aspects of experience are related. It doesn't mean that we can say bliss is reality, right? Or existence is reality. But recognizing the truth in all those would be amazing in terms of what could happen for a society. If we can recognize that and still function in our society, it would be amazing. So at that level, I would say yes. The answer to the question is yes. Can we say love is the knowing that we share our essential nature with all beings, animals, and things, and therefore acting with the best intention of utmost kindness? Yes, this is similar to Buddhism, I think. So Buddha talked about compassion, right? So that was his way of describing the way to live. live with compassion, right? With this love, right? And yet he also talked about the void and many other things. So yes, we can say this. So is love and do whatever you want a way of living from the second mind configuration? Love is a way of living, yes, right? Peace is a way of living, right? Self-expression is a way of living. It is when we're talking about a second mind configuration, we're simply saying that this deeper recognition is a fundamental part of our anatomy. It is not that it is a person who sometimes experiences love. It is a person who sometimes experiences this or that. But that is not the only view. It is that love is a fundamental aspect of what we are. Love, peace, stillness, and something beyond that that doesn't have any words, right? Prior to the second mind, that doesn't have any words, that this is what we are, that is also expressing as this body, as this personality, right? This is that second mind configuration that we're talking about. Katie says, ultimate reality is wacky. Yeah. Yeah. In my view, there's nothing we can really say about ultimate reality, though we do say it. Love, existence. These are the best, perhaps, that we can do with words. Which is why silence meditation becomes important. All right, we're at time. So 3 stages of meditation. Let's just list these and we'll talk about it more next time. So this is, of course, a way of describing meditation. Innumerable ways to meditate, right? This is not, everybody has their own way of seeing it. This is a very simple way that I chose to write about for someone who's curious about what might develop. So one way to see it is that initially there's this phase that we call mindfulness, right? Which is basically, as we begin to meditate, we become aware of the deeper layer of the mind, becoming aware of the thoughts, becoming aware of our feelings, becoming aware of the body. This happens usually if a person has not closed their eyes and sat with themselves for a while. First thing that'll happen is all the things that were not active in the mind will come to the surface. Everything that was just below the surface will come up to the surface, right? Then the next step is, at some point, once enough of that is processed or released, then silences will appear, right? Gaps in between the collage of experiences, in between the collage of images and feelings and ideas and stories and thoughts, right? So this recognition of, oh, okay, there is something else. There is something else. That would be a second stage. And then a third stage is diving into that, right? And this is where shifts in identity can happen, right? Because in the first 2 stages, it is me that is recognizing these thoughts and recognizing all of this. In the second stage, it is me, whatever that me is, we're not defining it right now. It is me, some sense of identity that is recognizing, oh, there's a silence here. Oh, there's something that feels nice here. The third one, that experience of me itself changes, right? Experience of location of identity changes, right? So we can very broadly talk about 3 stages of meditation like this. And we'll talk a little bit more about this next time. So if you have questions, please put them down here. I'll check them later in the week. This is the book, Is This a Dream? Available on Amazon. And I'll see you next Tuesday for episode 18. Let's just take a few moments here Simply being yourself. Meeting what comes as yourself. Meeting the praise that comes. Meeting the criticism that comes. Meeting the ups and downs that come as you are, however you are. Having access to this infinite resource that is you. Irrefutable, unconstrainable, and irreducible. Thank you. See you next time.